I sat alone in my cabin deep in the woods, my eyes scanning the pages of my old journal. It was filled with notes and drawing of the Wendigo, a terrifying creature from Native American folklore. I've always been fascinated by the stories of this monster, but little did I know that my obsession would soon become a reality. It all started when I decided to take a solo trip to the remote forest to do some research on the Wendigo. The quiet and peaceful surroundings seemed like the perfect place to fully immerse myself in my studies. However, as the sun began to set and the darkness crept in, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Something was not right. I could hear the snap of twigs and the rustling of leaves coming from outside my cabin. My heart raced as I quickly shut my journal and peered through the window, but saw nothing. I convinced myself that it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, that I should focus on my work. But as the night went on, the noises grew louder and more frequent. I decided to go outside and investigate, armed with only a flashlight. I cautiously made my way through the thick trees, my footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. That's when I saw it. A dark figure standing still among the trees. Its long, slender limbs and sharp claws make it look like a distorted human. I froze in fear, unable to move as the creature's eyes locked onto mine. It let out a deafening howl that made my blood run cold. I turned and ran back to my cabin, my heart pounding in my chest, but the creature was right behind me, its haunting cry getting louder and closer with every step. I stumbled into my cabin and slammed the door shut, desperately trying to catch my breath. I quickly locked all the windows and doors, hoping to keep the creature out, but the sound of scratching and scrapping at the door made it clear that it was already inside. I grabbed my journal, hoping to find some answers, but all I found was a sketch of a Wendigo with the words, "Beware, it can mimic human voices," written underneath. Suddenly, I heard a voice calling out to me. "Please, help me. I'm lost in these woods. Help me, please. I'm lost in these woods," the voice cried. It sounded like a young man, and my heart ached at the thought of someone being in danger. But I tried to remind myself that it could be a trap sent by the Wendigo. I closed my eyes and focused on my research, trying to convince myself that it was all in my head. But the voice continued to call out, begging for help. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I grabbed a flashlight and ventured out into the darkness, determined to find the lost soul and bring them back to safety. As I made my way through the woods, I could feel the creature's presence getting closer and closer. Its howls and growls echoed through the trees, making it hard for me to believe that the voice I'd heard was not real. I soon stumbled upon a clearing, and in the middle stood a young man, his eyes wide with terror as he pleaded for my help. I ran towards him. I could see that he was not human. His skin was pale, and his features were distorted, his limbs long and slender like the Wendigo. I immediately knew the truth. The creature had lured me out here using the voice of its previous victim. I tried to run, but the Wendigo was quick and strong. It grabbed me with its sharp claws, its eyes glowing with hunger that sent shivers down my spine. But I refused to become its next meal. With all my strength, I fought back, using my flashlight to blind the creature and make my escape. I ran as fast as I could, fear propelling my legs forward until I reached my cabin. Once again, I locked the doors and windows, but this time, I could see this creature circling my cabin, its red eyes glowing in the darkness. It let out a bloody scream that shook me to my core, a warning that would never stop haunting me. Days turned into weeks, and the Wendigo never left my cabin. It continued to scratch at the walls and whisper my name in its chilling voice, waiting for me to come out. I was trapped, too scared to leave and too scared to stay. One night, as I lay awake, I heard a knock on my door. It was a group of hikers, lost in the woods and seeking shelter. My heart raced, torn between wanting to warn them and wanting to save myself. But I couldn't bear the thought of more innocent lives being taken by the Wendigo. I took a deep breath and stepped outside, ready to face my fears. As I led the hikers back to my cabin, I could feel the Wendigo's presence lurking behind us, following us. But suddenly, it stopped. The howling and growling faded away, leaving behind an eerie silence. I turned to look back, and to my horror, I could see the Wendigo standing in the darkness, its eyes fixed on me. But this time, it was different. Its eyes were dim, and its body was weak and frail. It was then that I realized the Wendigo thrives on fear and terror. And by facing my fears and not giving into its tricks, I had weakened it. The hikers and I made it back to safety to my cabin, and the Wendigo never bothered me again. But the experience will forever haunt me, a reminder to never underestimate the power of our own fears. And I can't help but wonder how many others have fallen victim to the brutal and cunning Wendigo, and are still trapped in its endless cycle of terror. I sat at my desk in the small, isolated town of Oakwood, staring down at the snowy landscape. Winter had set in, and with it came a sense of unease. Everyone knew the legends of the Wendigo that roamed these parts, but we all brushed it off as a mere superstition. However, something about the frigid air and barren trees made me feel like it was more than just a myth. I had just finished my shift at the local gas station when I got a call from my uncle, who lived on the outskirts of town. He sounded frantic, his voice shaking as he asked me to come over immediately. Without hesitation, I made my way to his house, only to find it eerily quiet when I arrived. I called out for my uncle, but there was no response. As I cautiously made my way through the empty house, a chill ran down my spine. I had a sinking feeling that something was not right. Suddenly, I heard a loud thud coming from the basement. Ignoring my instinct to run, I crept towards the basement door. As I opened it, a putrid smell hit me in the face, causing me to gag. The basement was pitch black, and I could barely make out of any shapes in the darkness. But as I turned on the lights, my heart stopped. My uncle's body lay mangled on the floor, his limbs torn apart. I stumbled backward in shock, fighting for the urge to scream. That's when I saw it. A tall, emaciated figure standing in the shadows. His eyes were sunken and glowing with a fierce hunger as it stared at me with a wild, twisted grin. I knew immediately that it was the Wendigo. All those stories I had scoffed were immediately coming to life in front of me. I could feel its gaze burning into me, and I knew that I need to get out of there fast. I ran as fast as I could, my heart pounding in my chest, not daring to look back. I could hear the Wendigo's heavy footsteps behind me, its growls echoing through the house. It was getting on me, and I knew I wouldn't make it to the front door in time. In a desperate move, I darted into the nearest room, slamming the door behind me and barricading it with whatever furniture I could find. I could hear the Wendigo clawing at the door, its monstrous roars filling the room. I closed my eyes and prayed for it to go away. But when the door suddenly burst open, my heart stopped. The Wendigo stood before me, its twisted silhouette outlined by the moonlight streaming through the window. With a guttural snarl, it charged towards me. In a panic, I threw a lamp at it, hoping it to slow it down. To my surprise, it worked. The Wendigo let out a furious howl as the lamp shattered against his face, giving me enough time to escape through the window. I landed it on the snowy ground with a thud, my heart still racing as I sprinted towards the nearest road. I didn't stop running until I reached the police station, where I frantically banged on the door until someone finally answered. Gasping for air, I told them what had happened, but I could see the skepticism in their eyes. They had probably heard all the Wendigo stories before and thought I was just another person playing a prank. However, they couldn't deny the gruesome scene at my uncle's house. A search team was immediately sent out to the property, but by the time they arrived, the Wendigo was long gone. My uncle's body was found, and an autopsy revealed that he had been killed by an unknown creature. The whole town was in shock, and the stories of the Wendigo became even more terrifying. From that day on, I couldn't shake the feeling that the Wendigo was watching me. I could feel its presence every time I was alone, and I could hear its growls in the distance. I knew that it was still out there, hungry and waiting for its next victim. In the following weeks, there were more sightings of the Wendigo, and people started disappearing one by one. But no matter how hard we try, we couldn't catch it. It seemed to have a supernatural power, being able to hide in plain sight and disappear without a trace. As the months went by, the town of Oakwood became a ghost town. People were too scared to leave their homes, and those who did vanished without trace. It was like the Wendigo had taken over, claiming the town as its own. I was one of the few remaining survivors in Oakwood, hiding out in my uncle's house. Every night, I would hear the Wendigo's haunting calls, and I knew it was only a matter of time it found me. But I refused to give up without a fight. One night, as the Wendigo approached, I made a decision. I ran out of the house, armed with every weapon I could find, and came face to face with the creature. It snarled at me, its eyes filled with hunger, but I didn't back down. In the end, it was a fierce battle. We fought tooth and nail, but in the end, I managed to drive a stake through its heart, ending its reign of terror. As the Wendigo crumbled to ash before my eyes, a sense of relief washed over me. The nightmare was finally over. Years have passed since that incident, and Oakwood has now been abandoned. No one wants to live in that town that was once terrorized by a creature straight out from our worst fears. But I will never forget what happened that winter, and I will always make sure to warn anyone who ventures too close to Oakwood. The legend of the Wendigo lives on, a reminder of the horrors that can lurk in the most unexpected places. And I will always remember the terrifying truth that sometimes our deepest fears are based on more than just superstition. I've always heard the legend of the Wendigo growing up, but I never truly believed it. It seemed like just another scary campfire story to tell friends. That was until the night I encountered one myself. It was a cold winter evening, and my family had decided to take a trip to our cabin in the woods. We were surrounded by miles of dense snow-covered forest, and it was the perfect spot to get away from the chaos of the city. As a curious 11-year-old, I couldn't wait to explore the vast and mysterious wilderness around me. The first few days of our trip went by without any incident. But on the fourth night, as I was getting ready to go to bed, a strange feeling washed over me. It was like someone was watching me, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I shrugged it off as my mind playing tricks on me, and I snugged under my covers. But as I was about to drift off to sleep, I heard a loud screeching noise coming from outside. It sounded inhuman, almost like a wild animal in distress. My heart raced as I listened intently, trying to pinpoint where the sound was coming from. I got out of bed and cautiously made my way to the window, pulling back the curtains to peer outside. The moon was full, casting an eerie glow over the snow-covered landscape. And that's when I saw it. A tall, emaciated figure standing in the shadows of the trees. Its body was twisted and contorted, and its eyes glowed a sinister red. It was a Wendigo. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The creature was supposed to be a mere legend, a cautionary tale to keep people out of the woods. But here it was, right in front of my cabin, staring directly at me. Suddenly, the screeching noise grew louder, and the Wendigo let out a piercing howl. My parents woke up and rushed to my room, asking me what's going on. I pointed out the window, but when they looked, there was nothing there. "It's just your imagination, sweetie," my mom said, giving me a comforting hug. But I knew what I saw, and it wasn't my imagination. The fear of uncertainty that filled me the night were indescribable. From that moment on, I was constantly on edge, always looking over my shoulder. The next day, my parents decided to go on a hike to explore the woods. I begged them not to go, but they assured me that I had nothing to worry about. They left me at the cabin with my older brother, who was more interested in playing video games than babysitting me. I tried to keep myself occupied, but my mind kept going back to the Wendigo I saw the night before. I couldn't shake off the feeling that it was still out there, waiting for its next victim. As the sun began to set, my parents still haven't returned. I started to panic, imagining all sorts of trouble scenarios. It wasn't until late at night that they finally showed up, looking pale and shaken. "We saw something in the woods," my mom said, her voice trembling. "It was a creature, unsure anything we have ever seen. We ran as fast as we could to get back here." My heart dropped to my stomach as I realized that what they saw must have been the Wendigo. It was no longer just a scary story. It was real, and it was dangerous. We decided to leave the next morning and head back home. But as we were packing, I noticed the strange markings carved on the trees around our cabin. They looked like claw marks, and they were all over the place, surrounding us. My parents didn't seem to notice them, but I knew they were the doings of the Wendigo. It was stalking us, and I couldn't shake off the feeling that it was waiting for us to leave. That evening, after we had packed up and were ready to leave, I went for one last walk around the cabin. I wanted to see if I could find any more clues or signs of the Wendigo. But I didn't get far before the creature appeared in front of me, its glowing eyes fixated on me. I froze, unable to move or speak. The Wendigo let out a bone-chilling howl, and that's when I knew I was in serious danger. I managed to break out of my trance and ran back to the cabin, my heart pounding in my chest. I told my family what had happened, and they finally understood the serenity of the situation they were in. We quickly got into our car and drove away, leaving behind the cursed woods. For weeks, I couldn't sleep or concentrate properly. The image of the Wendigo haunted my every thought. I couldn't even look at the forest without feeling a shiver run down my spine. But what scared me the most was when I saw the news a few months later. A group of hikers had gone missing near our cabin, and their bodies were found mutilated and partially eaten by the mysterious creature. And the worst part? It was the same area where we saw the Wendigo. My fear of the creature grew, knowing that it was real and out there, preying on innocent people. I warned everyone I knew about the Wendigo, but no one believed me. They thought I was trying to scare them and made up a story. But I know the truth. I know that the Wendigo is real, and it's still out there, waiting for its next victim. So, if you ever find yourself in the woods on a cold winter evening, beware of the Wendigo lurking in the shadows, waiting to feed on your fear.